Ukta! Ukta! Oh! Ukta! Oi!
Ever since the prior episode, one individual in particular is rather dissatisfied and very unhappy about it. This old bull dinosaur in question has been displaced thanks to the intrusion of Ares. At 23 feet long at the maximum, ceratosaurs like this one are classified as small by large carnivorous theropod standards. And yet, even though he's small, he's definitely an old man in a profession where creatures of his kind have died young. This old bull, referred to as Bruiser, is likely to meet a very, very hard challenge. However, he's not going to give up that easy. Not without at least trying to keep his territory. So he could punk the neighboring Allosaurus out of a kill, even though the Allosaurus is many times bigger than him. Theoretically, he should be able to punk the newcomer out of his home turf, right? Seeing that his attempt at an aggressive threat display has proven fruitless, he clearly is going to have to get the better scent of this animal. Smelling the scent of Daspletosaurus, Bruiser, despite being a stubborn elder, decides to flee. Although he has the equivalent ferocity of a badger, Bruiser, on the other hand, has prior experience here on this island with Daspletosaurs. He knows how cunning and dangerous these tyrannosaurids could be, and he's not going to take the risk. And so, he makes the rare, once-in-a-blue-moon decision to simply give up on defending his territory. But that doesn't mean he's giving up on trying to find a means of survival. In the real world, this would not be the problem. Mostly because Ceratosaurus and Daspletosaurus were not in the same time period. Ceratosaurus was around during the Jurassic period, while Daspletosaurus was found during the Middle to Late Cretaceous period. But here on this island, this artificial ecosystem, yet again, anything can encounter anything. And on that note, it is very safe to assume that Bruiser is hungry. His nose has picked up the scent of small marsupials from the Cretaceous of Hell Creek. Whilst it's not realistic for the Jurassic dinosaur to encounter small marsupials from the Cretaceous period, one must remember that this is the artificial ecosystem of Gondwa, where various creatures from various places and various time periods are in the same ecosystem. And so, he preps up his ambush after tracking the prey down. Unfortunately for this alpha didelphodon, its smaller and weaker body did not match its aggression, and thus it cost this little mammal its life. On the plus side though, Bruiser now has some dinner in his stomach and will continue to eat the little mammal until he is full. While Bruiser bears a face that uncannily resembles that of a Tyrannosaurus rex and has teeth built for shearing through meat like a giganotosaurus, ceratosaurs are related to neither of those creatures. But there is, however, a debate on whether or not it's related to noasaurs, like the Machikosaurus, or abelisaurs, like the famous Carnotaurus. The jury and the debate is still out there. Misjudging the fall has cost Bruiser a very, very serious wound. No matter though, nothing a little bit of sleeping it off can't fix. Whilst realistically, it would take a lot longer for a fractured bone to heal up. Here on Gondwa, the animals here seem to have an accelerated healing factor whenever they sleep, and Bruiser is no exception on this ecosystem. Despite his age, Bruiser has proven himself to be curious, but not without caution, especially since he is out in wide open plains. Benefit though, he can spot prey a lot easier, but the detriment, however, there doesn't seem to be that much cover for him to hide behind, especially when apexes come by. However, Bruiser's initial perspective about the White Cliffs is about to change, especially with this labyrinth of stone that you see before you. While the White Cliffs is still classified as an unconventional habitat for his kind, it definitely has some points where he could set up an ambush as a means of sneaking up on prey. Animals like ceratosaurs usually rely on ambush as a means of getting a successful kill. But Bruiser is currently not in the mood for killing, mostly because the melting pot of an ecosystem referred to as Gondwa is currently in its season of plenty. Plenty of food for herbivores, and plenty of food for the carnivores to consume. Which means he is likely not going to be interested in the albino Parmalaria. Neither will he be interested in the Silosaurus, especially since he's more thirsty than he is hungry. His relatively well-developed nasal cavity, however, picks up the scent of potential competition for resources. Whilst it is not directly something like his former neighbor was, it is, however, a relative to it. This animal in question is a lot smaller and thus a lot easier for Bruiser to bully into submission than the Allosaurus was. The scent of this animal is overwhelmingly strong around this freshwater lake, and this freshwater lake is proving itself to be one of, if not the only source of fresh water amongst the White Cliffs. After a nice sip of fresh water, Bruiser is currently not interested in attacking the smaller animal. He's a bit more interested in exploring his territory, or at least a territory that could be his. There's just a few things he needs to figure out before making the decision of whether or not he wants this territory. It is starting to be slightly more promising, especially with the little corvid up top the dead tree. One of the many recent additions to Gondwa, the corvids have proven themselves to be very worthy of their stay amongst this ecosystem. Mostly because every time an animal uses them as a means of reconnaissance and exploiting the exact location of different animals, anything that does not get eaten is bound to get eaten by the corvids themselves. Corvids in question usually eat after the bigger carnivores have had their fill of food. Bird usually does this after combat has settled. But what was all this talk about some random corvid placed on Gondwa? The simple answer is that Bruiser has gained an apparent benefactor. Sometimes this benefactor could potentially be a backstabber. other animals have been known to use corvids as a means of reconnaissance. But it is nature. The inhabitants of it are not good, not evil, just trying to survive. Simply courageous about tomorrow, if they even live long enough to see it. So they do what they can to see tomorrow, like Bruiser does whenever he fights to eat or avoid being eaten. Thankfully for Bruiser, he has a full stomach, and nothing is trying to eat him. He is, however, curious about the ledge of rock. The question is, can he make the jump? Bruiser has failed the jump, but that is not going to stop him from trying again and again until he has honed in on it. Plus, on the other bright side, this failure did not cost him his life. It cost him precious time of exploring, especially since it is getting late, and Bruiser needs to find something suitable for him to sleep in, especially since nighttime brings its own dangers. Dangerous animals could come from anywhere, and thus, it is vital for Bruiser to find an area sheltered from apex predators and a choke point that could allow him to manage pack hunters that stalk at night. He seems to be rather perked up at the sight of a rock with an apparent shadow. Bruiser's suspicions are confirmed. He has found a cave, a much-needed shelter amongst his species. This cave in question is proving itself to be a lot more beneficial the more that Bruiser explores. Primary benefit of being in a cave, especially one as tight as this, is that apex predators cannot enter, especially with how tight of a squeeze it is. The other benefit of it is that he cannot be flanked so long as he keeps facing a pack of raptors, if they ever hunt in a pack, that is. He has spotted a rocky ledge. While it may seem hard at first, it seems like a suitable spot for him to nap in, or for him to sleep in during the night. With exploration of the cave over, he proceeds to exit the cave to see how much daylight he has left. This process, however, is relatively new to him, especially since he's in a different territory, not to mention the fact that he still has a competitor for resources to deal with. But that is something he can dispatch tomorrow. Upon further view outside the cave, he seems to have enough time for a hunt, but that's it. With the inspection of the outside out the way, he'll have to find food relatively quickly, especially before the dark hits. His best choice for fast food is probably from the sea. He's gonna have to test that broken land bridge, specifically to see if he can make the jump back. Due to the fact that he's in a new territory, he still has yet to learn the ropes regarding the rocky ledge. Whilst the Triassic Archosaur Pamelaria might be a decent source of protein, quick and easy, Bruiser, however, has had experience hunting for crabs, specifically Pseudocarcinus. He tends to find the Pseudocarcinus to be easy prey, especially during a food shortage. But in this time of plenty, he's just doing that because it's quick and easy. The only hard part of this situation is the swimming. While scientists sometimes debate on whether or not the animal is semi-aquatic, there's a decent chunk of evidence that suggests that it was not. But it was, however, an ambush predator. While it may seem unrealistic for a ceratosaurus to hunt a crab, we have found fossils of crabs coexisting with the dinosaurs. While it didn't specifically hunt the little king crabs that roam around the beaches on Gondwa, there is a good chance that it may have hunted something similar to it, specifically a similar type of crab. With a stomach full of seafood, Bruiser will try again, and then he fails. Oh well. No biggie, he will try again until he succeeds. Because that's what determination is. Even if it makes him operate like a misplaced wipeout competitor. At least what he learned is that this broken land bridge made of rock is clearly one way only for his type. Mostly one way because ceratosaurs do not have that great of jumping muscles, evidently. With supper out the way, and confirmation of where he may sleep, Bruiser has concluded that he will deal with a couple things and explore more of his territory tomorrow morning. Mostly because it is getting late, and he is getting tired. Mostly getting tired. He is an old bull after all. One of the many things about being an old individual is that sleep has become a lot more important, especially since the older one gets, the less energy one might have. With a better view of Bruiser's head, you can see that there are 3 crests atop of them. Whilst it's common a mistake to assume that they're for combat, in truth, they serve a purpose of displaying for the females of the species, along with simply communicating with others of its kind. Initially discovered by Othniel Charles Marsh during the most wacky events in paleontological history known as the Bone Wars, a dramatic time in human history as well as paleontological history, where 2 former allies in paleontology have begun to start a war, but not in the typical sense. More accurately in the sense of who could discover the more fossils and have them kept up non-dubiously. However, given how each team was treating each other's dig sites by sabotaging them or even blowing them up, it's such a surprise that Ceratosaurus has remained valid for, as of this recording and this video's upload, 1 century and 4 decades. But it's very unfortunate that there are a lot of species that either have been discovered but are no longer valid, or are not going to be discovered at all because of how often the dig sites were sabotaged and blown up. And all because 2 scientists could not agree on one simple thing. Ahem. Unhinged yet sentimental tangent aside, those crests atop of Bruiser's head are why his species is given the name Ceratosaurus, meaning horned lizard, mostly because the nasal horn was rather prominent compared to the brow horns. After taking a much needed amount of time to sleep in, Bruiser has awakened and is ready for a very long day. Because part of his chore list with his new territory is to first evict the current apex predator around this area. Given the scent of the animal in question, Bruiser seems to have an easier time punking this one, especially because this is a lot smaller than an Allosaurus. However, as the scent gets stronger, this time the scent is strongest at the base of the hill, where the lake is up top. The prior apex in question must have fled while Bruiser was sleeping. Well, on the plus side though, at least he doesn't have to worry about fighting the animal in question. All he has to worry about now is breakfast and water. After killing an unlucky mammal and drinking from the lake, Bruiser is now ready to explore more about this strange new territory. Whilst the new territory is relatively unconventional for his kind, it is very safe to assume that given the plenty of areas where he could set up an ambush, it will have to do. Although ceratosaurs on Gondwa have an excellent set of respiratory system and stamina, they usually prefer to rely on ambush in order to get a successful hunt. The other part of having a successful hunt is also practice. And part of that practice, for some large dinosaurs, is to simply toy with the prey items that it would probably be able to hunt, like this terrified Silosaurus. Had Bruiser been hungry, the Silosaurus would have been food for certain. But as you've seen in the clip, this wasn't really an attack for the sake of attacking. He was simply practicing and perfecting his art of the hunt. In the real world, it unfortunately is not confirmed of whether or not a dinosaur would have fun at the expense of other living things. Their modern counterpart, however, is the best example that we could ever have of dinosaur intelligence. But whilst that would be the simple assumption, it's kind of hard to assume intelligence of a dinosaur from the Jurassic period. But here on Gondwa, carnivorous dinosaurs are fairly intelligent, to an extent. In the case of Bruiser, decent enough intelligence to understand the concept of curiosity, especially when exploring the White Cliffs. And so far, his curiosity is paying off, especially since he sees a lot of food, along with plenty of places for him to set up an ambush in order to obtain the food relatively quickly. So far, only the central and northern side of the White Cliffs have proven themselves to have plenty of ambush points. But what about the southern side is what he wonders, and that is where he's going to explore to see what else the White Cliffs offer. The only hard part about this is the trek over there. It unfortunately does not help when an alpha creature could pop up anywhere. This Didelphodon is Exhibit Alpha of one of the many obstacles. Bruiser is gonna have to be careful if he is to get past, especially since he is not in the mood for a fight. Surprised that Bruiser has finally made it, he's as glad as his Archosaurian brain would allow that his stubbornness has finally paid off. Now it's time to go explore the new territory some more. Aside from the uncertain possibility of encountering an alpha critter, Bruiser now has this insurmountable wall of rock. But Bruiser really wonders, is this wall of rock really insurmountable? Bruiser's curiosity is about to tell him otherwise. In fact, both reality and Bruiser's curiosity in tandem have proven to Bruiser that this wall of sheer cliff is not really insurmountable by any means, especially since there are points where he could just climb up relatively safely. With that out the way, he has reason to look around and see what other kinds of sources of food could be there. But so far, Bruiser's nose has picked up the scent, a rather rancid scent, the scent of a Platyhystrix. These temnospondylus are usually necessary for the ecosystem to prevent overpopulation of various vermin species. However, due to the fact that they reproduce at a rapid pace, it could sometimes get out of hand. With barely any predators to eat the creatures, too many of them are usually an environmental destructive liability. The only thing that could detoxify them before being let back into the environment is through death and decomposition. In order for Bruiser to ensure that he still has food during this time of plenty, he will need to use all the skills he has mastered over the years to dispatch the small amphibians, because they are nothing more than competition for food. As for the environmental overview of the White Cliffs, the southern region seems to house a lot of points where he could set up an ambush, despite the fact that it is wide open spaces. However, due to how many points there are for him to set up an ambush, Bruiser has concluded that he has established his new home, and now he needs to take care of it as a means of ensuring that food isn't scarce thanks to the Platyhystrix. What Bruiser currently understands of the situation is that there are 2 Platyhystrix burrows. He'll need to approach one of them and see if the Platyhystrix will pop up. And when one of them pops up, that's the time to strike. But the hard part, however, is getting to the Platyhystrix den. His nose tells him that there is a way over there, but his sight tells him he's gonna have to find it first. Nothing that circling the rocky hill cannot do. In his attempt to access the Platyhystrix den, he sees what was once a very vast coliseum crafted by nature. But now, it is a sanctuary for some very few lucky creatures. Unlike the sail-backed amphibian Platyhystrix, this would be the first kill of 3 Platyhystrix that Bruiser needs to eradicate. This is nothing more than the beginning of what he needs to do to take care of his new home. While he tries to eradicate the vermin in his new home, he will explore more of it, especially as a means of understanding which points would be a good ambush. His need to explore will also reveal to him what areas he needs to avoid the most. And so far, he has learned to avoid most of the saltwater areas, especially since this artificial ecosystem tends to harbor very dangerous leviathans. As Bruiser explores more curiously across the long, rocky ledge of the White Cliffs, he sees a small island. An island that could be full of food, but the problem is, he's not built for swimming. He's built to ambush prey items of his size caliber or smaller, and when food is scarce, he's a kleptoparasite, meaning that he steals the corpses from other animals that have worked hard to earn their corpse to eat. Hyenas of real life tend to do the same with cheetahs, and lions of real life tend to steal corpses from hyenas, more often than what Disney wants to agendate. But Bruiser's hunger has driven him to ambush a small Pamelaria. Lunch now secured, Bruiser commits to his feast. Whatever he doesn't eat, he can afford to be wasteful with, especially since there is plenty of prey to go after. The scavengers will have a lucky day, especially since it is still the time of plenty. With his stomach now full of delicious meat, Bruiser moves on as a means of continuing his pest control mission, so that he can still have some delicious meat for the upcoming months. Bruiser's nose has tracked down another Platyhystrix den. The sound of Bruiser's footsteps are waking up and alerting the carboniferous temnospondyle. The little amphibian's intent is to see what is disturbing his slumber. That thing disturbing his slumber is of course Bruiser. Another Platyhystrix down, one more to go. But of course, Bruiser is gonna have to find it first. His primordial senses, however, are telling him that a storm is coming. The first thing Bruiser needs to do, however, is get some water to continue his quest. He's probably gonna have to ignore the noisy archosaurs of the Triassic, though. All the territory exploration and hunting of Platyhystrix has made Bruiser really thirsty. He's gonna have to drink his fair share and hope for the best afterwards. Ceratosaurus was an animal that specialized in hunting small prey, whereas the bigger and more famous Allosaurus, which did coexist with Ceratosaurus, specialized in hunting bigger, more dangerous prey. This is a type of ecological situation known as niche partitioning, where two animals of different classifications but a similar size caliber tend to indulge in a different niche. Because of this time of plenty, it is the primary reason why Bruiser did not bother bullying the young Allosaurus. Because there is plenty of food to go around all over this artificial ecosystem, and mostly because ceratosaurs are specialized in hunting smaller prey. In the real world, this translates to Camptosaurus, Dryosaurus, small reptiles, but in the case of Gondwa, it translates to hunting any of the small animals that roam around Gondwa. That, paired with the fact that Platyhystrix exist on this artificial ecosystem, along with the factor that Platyhystrix tend to compete with other animals over small creatures, it is relatively safe to assume why Bruiser is doing what he is considering to do, and that is to kill off 3 Platyhystrix as a means of ensuring that competition for food is lessened. He will have to hurry quickly, lest he gets barbecued by lightning. Whilst dinosaurs, like Ceratosaurus, tend to have tough scales to help them resist against various threats, lightning is not one of those threats that a Ceratosaurus can resist. Because of that, Bruiser needs to hurry or else he will be destroyed by the rain transformed. On the plus side, however, the Platyhystrix seem to be restricted to the southern side of the White Cliffs, so Bruiser doesn't have that much far away from his home cave once he gets the task done. Despite the smell of rain overwhelming his senses, Bruiser can smell the faintest whiff of Platyhystrix. The den closest to him is where he is heading. The last Platyhystrix in question seems a bit hesitant to exit the area. But Bruiser is not discouraged by any means. So, he runs around, causing a lot of tremors, in hopes of disturbing the Platyhystrix out of its den. With the task completed, it is time for Bruiser to head home and wait out the storm. He will have to get back to the cave quickly and safely. He does not know when the storm will end. Be it divine intervention, a matter of convenience, or simply nature just being nature, the storm has suddenly cleared out. The plus side, though, is that Bruiser doesn't have to worry about getting barbecued by lightning anymore. A greater benefit, however, is that the moisture from the rain will be absorbed by the plants. And moist plants are a great promise to prevent something very dangerous. A natural occurrence so dangerous that even the most dangerous of creatures fear a lot. The danger in question being fire, with the short storm keeping the possibility of fire at bay. It is safe to assume that Bruiser does not have to worry about being dethroned from ruling the White Cliffs. His current decree as ruler is his hunger. He has conveniently ran into a Didelphodon. Most certainly a tasty snack for an old dinosaur like him. Realistically speaking, Ceratosaurus wouldn't be able to eat Didelphodon. Primarily because Ceratosaurus lived during the Jurassic period, while Didelphodon lived during the late Cretaceous period. But in this artificial ecosystem, known as Gondwa, different creatures from different places and different time periods are prone to encountering and/or eating each other. As Bruiser continues to explore his territory, he can't help but notice that a lot of life is recovering, especially since he has terminated 3 platyhystrix. His contribution has ensured that food is available for him. Even though Bruiser has removed a lot of carboniferous temnospondyls, by that I mean 3, the other small animals have no reason to thank Bruiser. Especially since Bruiser is not going to think twice before eating them as well, and thus they still have reason to fear him, if not run away from him. Bruiser makes a run for the ridge, feeling confident in his ability to jump. Bruiser almost made it, but his failure proves that he still needs to perfect the jump. Even though he's old, he still needs to practice, cause one day, it'll come in handy. In fact, the time he actually succeeded the jump has proven itself in handy, especially when dealing with an alpha critter that Bruiser did not want to fight. But that is something for later. Bruiser has endured a very long day exploring a very large territory. Not to mention contributing to lessening his competition for food, and enduring a short storm. Bruiser at this point considers an early night. It is relatively common for an elder dinosaur like him to consider sleeping early and getting up late, because as life gets older, the more energy they expend existing, the more they need rest because of how tiresome it is. The upside, however, is that Bruiser has experience dealing with plenty of animals. This experience he's gained over time is what makes him an old man in a profession where men die young. And being a dinosaur is 100% a profession where men would die young. His prior territory may have been compromised by a bigger, meaner, and smarter dinosaur, but if following through this episode to completion has proven anything, is that Bruiser is capable of enduring a rather unconventional habitat, and possibly thriving in there. He has reason to believe that the White Cliffs are his true, final resting place. Even if it means being a misplaced wipeout competitor on occasion. Aside from that rather hilarious situation, Bruiser considers this his new home, but in doing such, he has inadvertently scared another creature from his home territory. Tune in next time when we follow the land shark of Spain as he finds a new home himself. But until then, Take care, live an amazing life, forget not your humanity.